A lot of my coaching is based in loving kindness, whether that's
Mm.
self-care and self-compassion, right? Self-compassion is such a hard thing, I think, especially for women. I still like, are we talking to ourselves the way we would a loved one or a cherished pet? Are we looking at ourselves that way? But also, finding self-compassion while we're trying to learn self-compassion, because we're always looking to be perfect. Or like you said, if a negative thought comes up, we sometimes criticize ourselves for that. But I think almost befriending that and saying to ourselves, these are going to come up. I see you. You might have served me well before, but you don't serve me now, and kind of releasing it, but recognizing it instead of fighting it. Because sometimes we fight it, it kind of wants to come up more.
Hello, my extraordinary women friends. Today on Extraordinary Women Radio, I am happy to introduce you to one of our speakers for the Extraordinary Women Ignite Conference, who is on a mission to help you break through overwhelm and lead a soul-nourished life. Joining us is the remarkable Renee Hagar-Smith, a heart-centered, mindful living and self-love coach. Renee specializes in guiding people to break free from the shackles of stress and overwhelm, allowing them to embrace a life of balance, fulfillment, and thriving well-being. And I love her definition of balance. Wait till you hear that in this interview. In our conversation, Renee delves into the pressing questions many of us face. Are you caught in the whirlwind of stress, struggling to find a moment of tranquility? Do the demands of your day-to-day leave little room for self-care and joy? Are you yearning to live a life that not only meets your responsibilities, but also nourishes your spirit? Well, Renee today brings her unique insights to the forefront as she offers practical strategies to conquer overwhelm and bring equilibrium back into your life. And the exciting news is she'll be sharing even more of her wisdom at the upcoming Ignite conference this November. If you're willing to ignite your wildest dreams and embrace a new paradigm of success, I hope you will join us at the 9th Annual Extraordinary Women Ignite Conference in Golden, Colorado this November. Picture yourself in a room filled with extraordinary women, empowering speakers, transformative strategies, and a community of like-minded individuals, all dedicated to creating more time prosperity and wealth prosperity in their businesses and lives. That is what awaits you at the Ignite conference. I hope you will join us. Get all the details and your tickets at CamiGellner.com/ignite. And this year we have both live in-person tickets available as well as virtual tickets. So you can join us from anywhere in the world. Now let's meet Renee Hagar-Smith, and remember, your journey to a stress-free and soul-nourished life begins now. Well, welcome to Extraordinary Women Radio, Renee. I am super thrilled to have you join us today.
Hi, Kimmy. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me as a guest. I love what you're doing for women and women entrepreneurs all over the world.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And I'm even more excited that you'll be here in Colorado in November at Extraordinary Women Ignite as one of our speakers. I know you speak on overwhelm and breakthroughs, and it's just something that I see a lot happening in the world is, there's overwhelm, especially as entrepreneurs. I think we can fall into habits of overwhelm. And so I think your messaging and how we really find that grounding is going to be really, really important at Ignite.
I absolutely agree. So my tagline is basically stress less and thrive more. And a huge part of that is dealing with overwhelm, because overwhelm hits our lives in so many ways. Overwhelm can be like physically overwhelmed. We have too many things that we have to do in our day, but it can be emotional overload, or like you said, for entrepreneurs especially, is there the scarcity mindset that comes up a lot that can really overwhelm us.
You can feel the weightiness of all of that. And, I think Ignite is so much about every woman stepping into the light of who they are. And if we're letting go of some of those layers, that's what really helps people break through into the new year. So I'm excited about your topic. I'm excited to get to be in person with you in Colorado. And so those of you who are wanting to know more information about that, you can join us It's over at CamiGellner.com/ignite. You can get all the details, and you can join us both live in Colorado. And we have new this year, we have virtual tickets. So I'm
Oh,
excited that
that's
we
so
have,
exciting because there's no
yeah,
limitations, right?
yeah. So people can really join in wherever they'd like, wherever they're at, and can get so much good information. And it's all about raising up your voice and your vision and your visibility and stepping into this new, stepping into the new year in such a great way. So where are you joining us from today?
So I'm joining you from Central New York, the Syracuse area, but I did
Yeah.
live in Colorado for 10 years. I
Oh,
absolutely
you
love the
did.
area and my niece is still out there. So it'll be so wonderful. It'll be like a homecoming to me to come back for the
Oh
12th.
my gosh, that's awesome. That's totally awesome. So let's just talk about what a mindfulness-based wellness coach is. What does that mean? That's what you do.
Right. So yeah, I'm a mindfulness-based wellness coach, or sometimes I call myself a mindful living life coach. And
Mm-hmm.
basically my coaching is rooted in self-care, self-love, self-compassion, and mindfulness. So stressing less, thriving more, but also getting to our heart center and kind of remembering who we are.
I like that. I mean, and that's why I felt so aligned with your work because when we are building our brands from the inside out, when we are building our business from the inside out, when we're taking care of ourselves from the inside out, it's all starting with this core of who we are. Why is that so important in your mind to bring that to your work?
So it's really important to me because I've dealt with a lot of trauma in the last few years. My husband was dealing with an undiagnosed and untreated mental illness for many years,
Mm-hmm.
and that brought a lot of chaos to our family life. Um, it started bringing me to a place where I didn't remember who I was anymore. And then 2 years ago, actually this month, he died by suicide. And through that process, I had started about 7 years ago this journey of it started with one yoga class, right? It always starts with one thing. But I
Yeah.
went to one yoga class in the hopes of maybe rediscovering who I was again. And through that process, I found that reconnecting with myself was really the key of what I needed to do. I went to yoga teacher training, to MBSR, which is a specific type of mindfulness training, became a Reiki master, and got certified in mindful self compassion in several disciplines through the years. And it started me becoming more present with my family, being able to handle the chaos in our household in a different way. But then when my husband died, obviously, my son and I needed counseling and we needed all that mental health support. But as the months after his death went on, I realized that those pieces of self-compassion and self-care and connecting to my heart center, being present in the moment, were what I needed to bring joy and balance back to my life and to my son as well. And so I could be present here for him. So when I discovered that those practices that I had learned, kind of incorporated in various ways as needed, had brought me back to a place of love in my life and opening my heart again. I wanted to bring that to other people and in whatever way they need. I mean, some people it's just stress at work, some people it's a transition in their life, and some people it's a loss or a trauma.
Right, right. And and it's interesting to me always that the universe gives us these gifts of, like you were getting this training, you said 7 years ago. And so
Right.
you were already getting these gifts of how are you going to kind of preparing you for what was going to be a really difficult time period.
Absolutely, absolutely. There were so many ways that the universe prepared me for this, whether it was
Mm,
neighbors who suddenly I was connected to, or family members I was closer to. There were just things that were put in place to help support me. And these practices, and really it was from 7 years all the way up that I was learning, and I'm still learning, of course, through my husband's death. These practices definitely were there to support me and my son and for me to eventually bring to other people.
so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. So how is this helping you today? Now, how are you weaving that into your work? And I love that you bring all these different modalities together. That's something that I'm really passionate about as well. It's like that makes us who we are. It's like we have these different modalities that we learn. We have, the different stories and experiences that life experiences that get us to this point right now, that we're able to weave all of our pieces of how we serve.
Right,
And so how
right.
how is this really helping you serve at this point?
So I think one of the ways that it helps me serve is by looking each client individually and
Hmm.
thinking about what really is going to help them be able to move forward, what kind of practices and strategies. So So my coaching, I come at from a place of micro changes and then stacking those changes on top of each other because I feel like when folks are already dealing with a lot of stress or a lot of overwhelm, you can't try to change everything at once or it's going to
Right.
be too
Right.
much, right?
Hmm.
So taking some of these practices and strategies that I've used and that I've seen help my clients and really change their lives. And just bringing them in small microdoses and keep stacking them and keep being consistent. And then just seeing that blossom in people is really how I think it's helping me serve as far as bringing in different pieces. I also recently contributed to a book called The Energy Healer's Oracle.
Hmm.
And this book brought together 25 authors from all over the world with different healing practices. And in that book, I talk about the practice of ahimsa. And ahimsa is a Sanskrit word that means non-harm, non-violence. Um, it's one of the yogic principles in the yamas, but it's also part of like Hindu tradition. And basically, I try to bring that into my practice in looking at things not from not harming, but from a place of loving kindness, which is the same thing. If you're looking at yourself or you're looking at others with loving kindness, it's impossible to really be harming, right?
What
I
was the
think
word again? Tell us one more
a,
time what the word is.
ahimsa.
How's that
So it's
spelled?
Ahimsa, and it's
Oh,
a
okay. There's an
Sanskrit
A
word.
on the beginning.
Yeah,
Himsa. Okay,
ahimsa.
cool.
Hmm.
Very cool.
And so I feel like a lot of my coaching is based in loving kindness, whether that's
Mm.
self-care and self-compassion, right? Self-compassion is such a hard thing, I think,
It
especially for
is.
women,
It is. I still, there's times, I catch myself, I'm like, why am I saying this to myself, right?
right, right.
So
Like,
really find,
are we
we would
talking to
never say
ourselves?
that to somebody else, right?
Exactly. Like, are we talking to ourselves the way we would a loved one or a cherished
Yeah.
pet? Are we looking at ourselves that way? But also, finding self-compassion while we're trying to learn self-compassion because we're always looking to be perfect. Or, like you said, if a negative thought comes up, we sometimes criticize ourselves for that. But I think almost befriending that and saying to ourselves, these are going to come up. I see you. You might have served me well before, but you don't serve me now, and kind of releasing it, but recognizing it instead of fighting it. Because sometimes we fight it,
Yeah.
it kind of wants to come up more,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, I like that tip to just really look that thought in the eye and say, you're being kind to it,
Right.
but then you're
Right.
releasing it. I don't
Yes.
need
And
you
then there's the
anymore.
releasing,
Yeah,
that part of
yeah,
it, which maybe
yeah,
you'll have to do a million times because if
totally.
it's something, if it's something that's been
Many probably will.
right. If it's something that's come up with you for so many years, it becomes part of our self-identity at some point. So it takes time to kind of let go of some of those limiting beliefs, but they don't have to control us if we're not
Yeah,
afraid of them.
yeah, yeah. I like that a lot. I like that. So, one of the things I know that you are often talking about is this feeling of overwhelm. And as entrepreneurs, we can find overwhelm pretty easily. And I think this is one of the things that we can really, learn to address in different ways. And when you're thinking about overwhelm, how did you even find your path into to owning overwhelm and being an expert in that space?
So overwhelm was a huge, huge problem for me when my husband first died because I was dealing with so much emotional
Yeah.
overload that I found I could handle the large things, right? I could handle like starting a new business, I could handle these things, but returning a package to the post office seemed so overwhelming to me. It would just sit in the corner for weeks because I just couldn't do the small things. It was the extra raindrop in the bucket that was overflowing. So I had to start thinking about what kind of strategies could I use so I could, again, find that balance, right? Because if we're dealing with the overwhelm, we're still in a space where we're not as balanced. And it's probably not possible to be balanced all the time. But
Right.
the more often we are, the more our parasympathetic nervous system is calm, the less we're in fight or flight, right? So I do work with clients a lot on
Let's
overwhelm.
let's stop on that, on the balance piece of it, because I want to even just go a little deeper as in the lens of overwhelm, but balance and what that means. Because I often talk about it being integrating, like integrating life, integrating how it, because we're often flowing. What does balance even mean to you?
To me, it means balancing between our body and mind. And the reason I think
I
about
love
the
that.
body is because the
Yeah.
body is where we hold the stress a lot of the times.
Yeah.
And also, when we drop into our body from our mind, that's when we're in the present moment, right?
Ah,
Like
so good.
if we're thinking of the future, if we're thinking of the past, if we're kind of living in regret, or we're worried about, our next presentation, worried about presenting at Ignite for all your wonderful entrepreneurs. If you're living in that space,
Yeah.
then that's where the anxiety comes up. So when I think
Yeah.
of balance, I think of making sure you're balanced kind of in your body and mind. And sometimes that means, softening your body or
Mm.
stretching your body, or making sure that that is also in a good space instead of just making sure your mind is. Because if they're not balanced, you're
Yeah.
still going to find yourself tight and not feeling like you're in a relaxed place, and your health will take a fall at some point from that.
Right. I'm glad I questioned that, because I was thinking in balance between life and work and all the stuff which I think is really difficult. I think that's where I was like, the integration word works better for me, but I love balance in mind and body, because that is something all within control within us that we can
And
work
that's
with.
what I think is work-life balance. I think if
Yeah.
you're balancing and finding that centering and that grounding space, you
Yeah.
can handle that work-life balance.
Oh, so good.
To
Yeah.
me, it's all one package, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I love that. And so back on this topic of overwhelm, you went through your own journey of figuring out how to do that. And when we think of entrepreneurs right now and all the stuff that can create overwhelm, in our world right now too. I mean, it's like you can go up and not just as entrepreneurs, but as people living in our world, there can be all kinds of things coming at us.
Right.
And so why do you think it's so important right now to really be teaching the good things that you're teaching?
Specifically, yes, on overwhelm. I think because overwhelm affects so many parts of our lives.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if we can find the strategies for overwhelm, they can often be used for difficult emotions, for challenging situations or conversations that we have. So I work with my clients. I have 6 strategies, but the first strategy that I use for overwhelm, and really for a lot of life, is to pause, to press that pause.
I
I mean,
love
if
that
we
word.
don't
It's my favorite word.
if we don't take time to pause, and pausing can be before you go down the hall and talk to your boss,
Yeah.
before you make that phone call, before you answer your child when they're asking you an important question. But it can also be before you get started on a task that maybe feels overwhelming to you, right?
Right. Right.
Pausing, centering, taking that deep breath, 30 seconds, 2 minutes, whatever you need, looking at something in nature. So pausing is kind of that first step, but that also works in so many places of our lives, right? And then the second strategy that I often work with my clients in overwhelm is accepting the emotion. Because again, sort of like accepting those critical thoughts are going to come up. If you're fighting the emotion, you're not dealing with it. You're not letting it process through. And there has to be an element of it processing, or it's just going to keep coming up for you.
Right. Right.
So those are the first 2 things that I generally work with folks on, and I feel like that's kind of a broad base through a lot of challenging situations in our lives.
Yeah. And it's the whole concept of pause has been a big one for me, because like how you move between meetings throughout the day, how do
Right.
you move at the end of your day into your evening, that kind of a pause and I don't always remember. And I set myself up thinking, yes, I'm going to do those, I'm going to make these pauses. And when I do it, I know that I feel lighter. I don't feel the weight of all emotion and switching it. And I think it's heavy to switch from one thing to another without a pause in between them. I think it starts to layer upon us.
Clutters our
And
mind. I think it starts to clutter
yeah,
our
yeah,
brains. Yeah. And I
yeah,
think that it all starts in the morning, to be honest,
yeah,
for me. If
yeah,
you can find even 4 or 5 minutes, and it doesn't need to be a half hour, but having some sort of a process, even if it's while you're still in bed, to
yeah.
breathe and pause and kind of center, I think helps us to remember a lot as we go through the day to do the same thing. And
I so
having some
agree.
moments of silence, even if it's a few minutes in the car, because our minds do get cluttered as the day goes on, just because of media and conversations and all the things that are kind of running through our brains. So having those quiet moments helps as well to learn to remember to press that pause.
Yeah, yeah. I think the quiet moments that I'm big on my morning rituals, and I call it a ritual because I like that space. I like, that it's magical. It's mine. It's my space.
Yeah.
And it doesn't always look the same throughout the year. It changes. Like right now, I love walks in nature right now because it's beautiful outside. And I don't want to be doing that in January, but so I shifted up, but my morning meditations, insight timers. And I think the interesting thing that I use insight timer generally for my meditations, but I also appreciate the moments where I pause without any noise, without listening to something. And I think that is important because so often we can, like you said, we are always being hit with so many messages, and even meditation can be with like insight timer, which I love, can be really great, but also just remembering to make, add in some space too, where it's just quiet.
Right. The space is important, but also it's kind of interesting when you brought that up, a thought came to me that when people think of mindfulness, they do often think of kind of like sitting in silence, maybe cross-legged for an hour.
Yeah.
But we can find mindfulness anywhere because it's really about being in the present moment.
Yeah.
And if folks find that sitting in that space of quietness does get challenging, because if someone's been through a trauma, or maybe they're dealing with ADHD, or they have certain challenges that make it harder to sit, you can still find that mindfulness by, like you said, taking a walk, by being active, or even throwing on a body scan with your headphones while you're cleaning. So you're like moving into the body, but you're still doing something active.
Yeah.
So just remembering that we can find these places of mindfulness in so many different ways. It isn't just about sitting and being quiet all the time, but having some of that space also is a nice centering practice,
I love the idea of doing body scans while we're doing other things, because it's like you're just going through your chakras and you're just doing the scans, and you're so just confession here. I did Reiki training way back, like probably 25 years ago. Healing touch for animals. So it started with the animals, because I was working on a horse. Somebody did some work on one of my horses, and I started learning the healing touch for animals. And I was like, this is cool stuff. And then I moved,
very cool.
Yeah. And then I moved into the Reiki. So it's like, I did that work. And I think that I don't think, I know that I integrate that work into my coaching with my clients, because I'm always dropping into, where are you feeling something in your body? Let's work with this together. And so I think that I think that's why I was really aligned with your work as well, is because of that how you embody, how you get into the somatics of things. I feel like that's really important in my work. So a nice line, nice linear connection between us on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I agree. And like we said, kind of having that body mind kind of connection.
Yeah. So what are some strategies, and I know we've hit on a couple of these already, what are some strategies that people can use when dealing with overwhelm in just everyday life? Give us one more, and I know you're going to give us more at Ignite, but just give us one more tip that they might be able to take away from today.
I think it's focus on what you can control.
Good.
Yeah, because I feel like, especially as entrepreneurs, sometimes we have a lot of things on our agenda, a lot of things that we want to do. But if we do get into that overwhelm, once we start focusing on something we can control, we start feeling more of that control in our mind. And once we have that, it's easier to take on some of the larger tasks. So, and sometimes that means, looking at lists and prioritizing, because lists to me are super important. I'm kind of a person who loves my lists and my calendar reminders.
Me too.
Yeah. So that's a great way of thinking of, what we can control, and being able to cross something off feels great.
Yeah, absolutely. So at Ignite, we will be talking a lot about how do we create more time prosperity and wealth prosperity in our lives. And when I think of these two aspects, it does mean slowing down and pausing. It does mean really getting into our body and knowing who we are and stepping from that space, some of these things we've been talking about. And it also really means this being intentional about how we're building our businesses, the right packaging, the right pricing, so that we're intentionally setting up time time in our businesses, how we serve, and how do we make time and space for ourselves.
Right.
So these are all topics that we're going to go into much more deeply at Ignite. And I think it's going to be amazing. We have such an amazing lineup of speakers. So
absolutely. I can't wait for
it. Yeah. So where can people learn more about you and your work, Renee?
So they can visit my website. It's reneehagar-smith.com. And also, I offer a free session for folks to kind of see how we work with each other. And we talk a little bit more about my work, so they could sign up right on my website if they'd like.
Excellent. And the final question I always close with are, what are 3 pearls of wisdom you'd like to leave with us today?
I think you were talking about purpose and intention. So I think that just writing intentions are really powerful to me. So starting your morning with a centering, with an affirmation, and with an intention. Those are my 3 pearls of wisdom.
Oh, nice. I love that. I love it. Well, cool. Well, thank you so much, Renee.
Thank you so much,
great
Cammie.
having
I'm so
you here.
looking forward to seeing you in November and to seeing all the listeners out there as well.
Absolutely.
It'll be a great conference.
It will be. Okay. See you soon. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.